Yeah, and even science, it doesn't negate it completely, right? For example, dreams. Can't put dreams under a microscope. You can't check, can't prove dreams like that. It's purely testimonial and experiential. So bearing that kind of context in mind, that we've got science and science informs us about the world, what would you say is the inference to the best explanation about how the universe came, from what you know so far?
We studied about the Big Bang, so I guess that's the truth, but we are so young, so I guess it's a little bit early to take a position about this deep question. I mean, it's a difficult thing.
Also because there are a lot of theories around that, so it's difficult even to take part of it.
But here's the thing though, there are many theories about even the physical reality, right?
Yeah.
You've got the theory of matter and form. Then you've got string theory. Then, of course, you've got, the theory propounded by Stephen Hawking, the M theory. So you've got all of these theories. Now, as human beings, what do we do when we're presented many theories? We falsify them, right? We see which one is the inference to the best explanation, which one makes the most sense to us, and we hold that position, right? So I would say we can do the same thing even when it comes to the universe. If we look at some people say universe came by chance. Yeah? Now chance is ignorance of the variables. For example, if I roll a dice, you guys have done mechanics. In mechanics, they tell you that, look, this is the probability. Why? Why is it probability? Because we don't know all of the variables when we roll a dice. If we were to do it in a controlled environment and we knew about the surface tension in our hand, we knew about gravity, we knew about upthrust, we knew about surface tension, we would be able to predict the dice, right? Similar with if an acorn is falling from the tree, we'd be able to, if we knew all the variables, we'd be able to predict it. So chance is a ignorance of the variables. So chance doesn't necessarily explain everything because it falls into a fallacy called the fallacy of reification, which means giving something intangible tangible characteristics. Like, how did that can end up on the grass? Oh, Mother Nature. What, you're saying Mother Nature came along and did this? And no, Mother Nature doesn't do things. Mother Nature's a label that we've given something that we don't really understand, right? Or something that's abstract to us. An abstract thing has been given physical properties. Similarly, they do the same with chance. They say, oh, chance created. How can chance create things? It can't. Okay? Chance is just our explanation of ignorance of the variables. So would you say I've given a good case that doesn't make sense that chance created everything? Do you think it's reasonable?
I think it's very difficult to think about it because if we study like the modern physics, there's still a lot of questions that we can't answer. And I think the base of every religion or thought is to be open-minded because like you said, every theory needs to be, it can change during the time. And I think everyone should have an open mind and informate and keep thinking about it. It's the difficult question.
That's true as a way of living. Yeah, that you can follow a certain, for example, you will buy one shampoo. But it doesn't mean if someone buys another shampoo, you have to insult the person or you do this. You can respect the fact that there's choice. And you can respect, you got extra dandruff, you can use the anti-dandruff one. You need silk and shine. You're very into, the herbal stuff and you need organic things and that sort of stuff. But you will still buy a shampoo, right? So similarly with truth, there is one truth, right? We can't have multiple truths. You can't say this. If someone says this is a microphone, someone says it's an elephant, someone says it's an acorn, someone says this is chips with extra vinegar. Now you can say, look, we can have our opinions. I can respect your opinions, but the inference to the best explanation for me that I've come across is that it's a microphone. I will give you my evidence. I will hear you. I will respect your thing, and we can agree to disagree. So you can have and know the truth, but be respectful as well. So similarly, the same with these sorts of things as well. Now, if I take your thing forward, if someone says there is no God and you say I respect you, you're right. Someone says there is a God, you say I respect you, there is right. Now there's a contradiction. Yeah, there's a contradiction now. You can't say both are right. You have to accept that there's one. One of the options is correct. Either there's a God or there's no God. Yeah, but you can still say I respect your belief. Yeah, and Islam definitely, I don't know about the other faiths, but Islam definitely, there's copious evidences in scripture and practically that Islam amicably is and lives and survives with other faiths as well. Yeah. Now, if we come back to this point, we can, through the process of elimination, say which one makes the most sense. That's why I said inference to the best explanation. Was the universe created by chance, nothing, or created by something? Now, you guys maybe know a bit of logic, so you know Leibniz's principle of sufficient reason, which is every cause has an effect, right? Cause and effect. Things don't come without a cause. Yeah, if we start accepting that, then life becomes incoherent, science breaks down, geography breaks down, maths breaks down, everything breaks down, right? So every cause has an effect. For us to say that there is an exception to this, then an exception requires exceptional evidence, right? So similarly, when we say that surely the universe had a cause, somebody goes no. So, okay, what do you think is a cause? Chance. But does chance create things? Can you give me an example? No. Because there's no example of chance creating something functional. You're free to give me a counter example. I have a vase. I smash it. It's not going to turn into a glass swan. There's an explosion. Whenever there's an explosion, people run away and they call emergency services. They don't say, yay, it's probably a new building that's been made by chance. No, what do you mean created by? Oh, there's 1 in a billion chance that it could have turned into, the Eiffel Tower. What's the inference to the best explanation? Okay, the inference is no. Inference is run. So when it comes to everything else, we say, you know what? It doesn't make sense. The world cannot come by itself. It doesn't make sense. Look at the objective design that we see. Butterflies. Even when you look at the arrangement of seeds within the sunflower. Even when you look at the leaves on a stem, they follow either Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio, which is objective design, not design that we conjure up in our heads. Now, objective design requires a designer. I would have thought that that's a logical conclusion. If somebody goes no, what do you think makes more sense? Design requires a designer, or design happens with a 1 in a billion chance of by itself of a billions of, which makes the most sense to you?
I mean, it's a very difficult question because, we are saying that it's design. I mean, we can see the patterns, but there's no physical evidence that it's actually a pattern.
But I gave you the physical evidence, right?
Yeah, of course. But I mean, it's an interpretation of ourselves.
No, because
I think that there's no designer, but it's mostly like the evolution kind of stuff. I mean, the sunflower has a specific kind of seed arrangement because of natural causes. Like, for example, if a sunflower doesn't have a specific arrangement of seeds, maybe it wouldn't turn to the sun when the sun
No, I got what you're saying. Let's roll with that. So you might make the argument that one particular thing came by chance. Yeah? But then the sunflower is part of a greater ecosystem. The animals that only eat the sunflower, that require the sunflower for their existence, and they have the bacteria in their stomach to digest that, right? Then they've got the teeth. For example, a lion is designed to eat meat. He's got canines, right? He's got incisors. But when you look at, for example, sheep, they've got flat teeth. Their teeth are not designed, nor do they have the bacteria within their stomach to digest the meat. So when you start now compounding the chances, so the sunflower, then its relation with the animals around them, then the carnivores related to the herbivores, linked to the sunflower, also linked to the conditions of planet Earth, that the level of oxygen and nitrogen, because the nitrogen is higher than the oxygen, right? And then you've got, because the oxygen, do you know where the majority of the oxygen comes from on planet Earth? No. It actually comes from these micro beings that are actually on the surface of the water. Yeah. So that's where it comes from. Now, those small, tiny little things. Now, how is it that they are enough, that they are producing the oxygen, enough for the sunflower to survive, that it's enough for the creatures that eat it, that are then eaten by the others, and it's an all intricate system, and they then in turn have the organs. They have the organ systems. Then they have the cells, which have the organelles, which then have the DNA, that then have the genes, then have the atom, yeah, that then have the protons, that then have the neutrons, that then have the quarks, that then have the neutrinos. Do you see? Like, maybe a person might think, you know what, maybe one thing came by chance. But when you compound this chance, then you've got the likes of physicists. I think he's a physicist, Paul Davies. He says that the probability of even our planet being the way it is, to come the way it is like 1 in 10 to the power 30. Many others have said more than that. Yeah, but the point is that it's so infinitesimal, yeah, that we do not live our life like this. For example, there is a chance that we can be standing in the park and 5 pigeons can come together and do a giant duke on us, yeah, a nuke. But we don't live our life like that. There is a possibility that when you cross the road, that even if the green man is there, that a car can still run into you, but you don't live your life like that. But when it comes to religion, I say we clutch to the infinitesimal over the bigger body of evidence. And I'm saying if we follow the same criteria of evidence, we would be more fair. And we would say the chance of a creator is more, because of our general thinking when it comes to everything else. And even if I was to take your point of evolution, we have no issue with that. Evolution and Big Bang, they are mechanisms. God is a creator of mechanisms, so we don't believe that they contradict each other. You can have Big Bang, you can have gravity, you can have evolution. They are mechanisms, but that still asks the question, where did the mechanism come from? Why was the mechanism enough that the sunflowers were able to grow and turn to the sunlight, like you've said, that they are in the right places at the right time for the right creatures, the creatures that require that level of nutrients, etc. And that's why I would say that the question of God still remains.
Yes, but it's, I think...
Go ahead. Yeah, be honest.
One of those many theories. I mean, you can say maybe that the Big Bang comes from a black hole or from God. I don't know. I don't know that, but I still think that God didn't create the Big Bang. So thanks to the Big Bang, we came from the Big Bang, etc. And the sunflower turns into the sun thanks to what came before.
Yeah. Would you say that we exist? And would you accept that there are 2 types of existence, dependent and independent?
I didn't get it.
So everything can be classified into 2 forms of existences. either dependent or independent? Or do you think that there's another form of creation? Or do you think there's an exception to this?
I think it's dependent. But as I said before, there are too many theories to think of.
No problem. But just like there are too many programs on Netflix, it doesn't mean that we are paralyzed in fear, right? We still go through them. There's so many choices in life, especially now. I mean, Dave Chappelle said that the children nowadays, they can go home and watch any movie ever made like that. Yeah, it's literally at your fingertips. But that doesn't mean that we're at home paralyzed with choice. We still make choice. Yeah, we still go through them.
But I still don't have a favorite film. So
Do you think you will never have a favorite film?
I don't think I will. Because there are too many films to watch. I cannot watch physically every film. So I won't have a favorite one.
Absolutely. We'll come to that example. It's a good example, yeah? But you said, I think you misunderstood what I was saying, yeah? So if there is existence, and there are two forms of existence, either dependent and independent, and us and the universe are dependent, then the question would arise by definition. If we are dependent, the universe is dependent upon what? It has to be by definition dependent on something, right? Fantastic. And that thing, we're dealing now with deductively. Yeah, deductively, purely deductively. Then that thing is that thing dependent on something, dependent or independent?
I think dependent.
Now there's two options now. Either it goes on forever, dependent, or there has to be an end to that chain, which would mean that there is an independent end to that chain. Which do you think is coherent?
I think that it should be go on forever. Because if our universe is purely dependent on something, on the things that came before, etc., I think that there should be a continuous.
But think about what you're saying though. Let's deep this, yeah? So you're saying we're dependent. Universe is dependent. Now dependent on dependent. How can something dependent exist by itself without an independent thing?
Because it depends on something that depended before on something.
Yes. But surely there has to be an end to that chain,
Why does it?
because firstly by definition, a dependent thing for its survival needs to rely on something, right?
We don't have a material thing that is independent right now, so why should be an independent thing back in the day?
So you're confusing two things. You're confusing inductive with deductive, yeah? Inductively, you're right that we're going by our observation. That's why I made the clarification of deductive, because we don't know, like you said, universe is dependent on this. We've gone down the line and we can't observe that. So that's why it's a deductive argument. But now deductively, we're saying surely something which is dependent has to rely on something independent to exist. Otherwise, it becomes incoherent and illogical. It doesn't make sense. Because something, by definition, let me give you an example. If you see a mobile, if I threw the mobile phone on the floor, and you asked me, why did you throw it on the floor? I said, because I asked him. And then he asked him. Then he asked him. Then he asked him. Then he asked him. We can keep going, and you become tired. You have to conclude the end of that chain, there was somebody that said, throw the phone. Otherwise, the fact that the phone has been thrown doesn't make sense. Why was it thrown if the condition was that I will throw it if somebody tells me to throw it? So, for something to be dependent and survive, they have to get that from an independent thing. Otherwise, the chain can't start. You can't start the chain off from a dependent thing, from a dependent thing. Yeah? Because let's just say the first thing was dependent. By definition, dependent on what?
ask him, etc.
Yeah.
You go at the end of the chain.
Yes.
This is a physical example still.
Yes.
So it's not what I meant. Comunque è un esperimento fisico, non è. Possiamo portare questo esperimento anche di là.
Basically, it's still a physical thing because we are thinking with the idea of time, so the space.
But both are physical, right?
Yeah, but this experiment,
That's physical. The example.
the example is still physical.
Yes.
So why?
And the universe is also physical,
Yeah.
dependent on physical.
So why my example wasn't good? So
Which one?
if we don't have an independent here on Earth,
Yes.
for example, why we should have an independent thing at the end of the chain?
Okay, so that means that you are restricted to. So you're saying that the only thing is the law that works on this planet, right? Is that the point that you're saying?
Yep.
But then we've.
Not just in this planet.
Yeah.
Because in other planets too, there's a reason. Maybe because of the ice that there's on Mars. There's a reason. And that reason came from a reason, and etc. So if we don't have an independent thing in the universe, in our universe, why we should have an independent thing at the start of the universe?
Because an independent thing in the universe would make it dependent. Because the universe is dependent,
I
right?
don't know how to say it in English.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to
No problem.
elaborate what I'm thinking.
I'm patient. No worries.
It's really difficult.
What language is this?
Italian.
Italian. Wow. It's a bellissimo argument, you know? Yeah. Shall I just add one more thing in while you're thinking of the word, yeah? So let's just say, for argument's sake, you say that there is infinity. It goes on for infinity. That's been refuted again by the fact that there is movement. Let's just say that there is a planet that has been rotating for infinity. Yeah? If it continues rotating, that would mean you are adding to infinity. So a planet that's been rotating for infinity. Each time it rotates further, you are adding to infinity because a new rotation has happened, right? Yeah? But that means now there's a problem.
No, because
Let me tell you why. I'll tell you and then you can jump in. Because the more rotations it's doing, you're adding to infinity, and by definition, infinity cannot be added to. You're trying to exhaust an inexhaustible. Yeah? You're trying to add to something that simply cannot be added to. Infinity is infinity. If you're adding to infinity, it's no longer infinity. If you're taking away from infinity, it is no longer infinity. Go ahead.
I think that if something is going on infinitely, it's infinitely. You cannot add something
Exactly.
infinitely. But if, for example, the planet that goes on forever, it's going on infinitely, so you don't add another rotation to that one.
So surely, let's just say today it's reached, you can still see it spinning, yeah? And then it's about to complete the rotation. Now when it starts the new rotation, is that part of the previous one or is it a new one? Has that rotation happened before, that particular one that's about to happen? Or is it a new one?
It depends on the concept of time and space you have.
Here we're talking about movement, and remember, time is movement. You guys know physics. Distance equals, DST, right? Movement. Speed is distance over time. So if there's movement, there is time. If there's no movement, there's no time.
It's the mass mass that causes the time. It's not the movement.
Right. So,
The mass, the gravitativity, and the time.
so in other words, a bend in time and space, that's gravity, right? Now, theoretically, though, if everything stood still, everything, would there be time?
If there's mass, I don't
No, if everything stood still, not talking about mass at the moment.
we cannot imagine the time if not the way we live it.
Look into this when you get a chance, yeah? Look into this. If everything stood still, there's no time. Check this. So, coming back to the point, yeah? So, Walaikum salam. If there is movement, then there is time. So here, the new movement that's taking place is adding to infinity, which again doesn't make sense. If you don't like that example, us moving over here, we're adding, right? Adding to something which is supposed to be infinite, which again doesn't make sense.
It's just the infinite. So we're not adding, we are living the infinite.
Right.
So we're not adding to the infinite.
Even though we're living in the infinite, the fact that we are doing things that didn't exist before means, by definition, things are being added to. For example, there's a box and there are 10 apples in there. If I'm putting things in there that were not in there before, I am adding to it.
But this is still, I don't think it's the right example.
No problem. Give me another one.
Can I speak something? Can it be a bit direct in the example?
Okay, yeah.
For example, as a human being, as Muslims, what do we believe in? If someone will pass away, how will they pass away? Do we know? Do you have a time? Like if someone will pass away, or like, do you have the time? No time.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Allah knows what's the time for all the humankind.
Right.
You know, am I right?
Yeah.
We don't know nothing about what's gonna even happen tomorrow. For example, Allah ya'lamu.
Okay, brother, let me just finish this, yeah? Okay. Even if you maybe use other examples, there's a theory that says that if the universe had been around forever, then there would have to be an infinite amount of stars. Yeah, so when we look up at the night sky, there would be so many stars that technically speaking, we wouldn't even have a night time. Just think about it. You've been around for infinite. Now the amount of stars, there can't be any black space because it's infinite, right? So that maybe is an example that you can maybe vibe with.
Because we don't know what comes before the Big Bang. So maybe there's a theory that the Big Bang comes from the explosion of a black hole. So maybe the infinite stars that are not this universe were in the first.
So how God wanted to redeem humanity?
The first universe.
Not the first universe, but the universe that came before.
Yeah, exactly. So the preceding universe. But you're still now you've just pushed the problem back now, right? You're saying that this universe is one of millions of other universes. But the question still arises, yeah? What caused those universes? And where did those universes come from? Okay, they came from a black hole. Is that black hole dependent or independent? Okay, that's dependent. Dependent on what? Something else dependent? Okay, is there an infinite regress or is there an end to that chain?
I think that's an infinite business.
Right. So if you have an infinite regress, then what you're now saying is that infinite regress is, number one, things are being added to. Yeah, like I talked about movement. And we can even say, well, movement / time. Because things are being added to, it's incoherent with an actual infinity. Because I'm sure you accept that an actual infinity doesn't exist, right?
But I'm still thinking about the infinity, like you're living the infinity. So
Well, like what?
we are talking, but we're not.
She means that we are already living the infinity. We did not create anything or anything is going. It's like the law of nothing created. It's always changing form.
But nothing created or changing form only started at the Big Bang, right?
Yeah, but we don't know what's before.
Exactly. But what we can say axiomatically is whatever is before the Big Bang, by definition, has to be dependent.
I don't know. I think it's a little bit difficult to create an establishment about something we can't even.
No problem. But there would be two options though, right? Either what preceded the Big Bang is dependent or independent. There is no other option.
It's very human logic about the part of a yes or no. I think there are many ways of thinking about it.
But then again, there are many ways to think about physics. You guys don't say when you're learning about speed or time, oh, there's many ways to talk about time, therefore we won't talk about time, or we won't hold a position on time. Or there's many definitions of mass, there's many different definitions of species, there's many different understandings and definitions.
We start with some definition to elaborate a theory.
Yeah.
But it's also based on the definition. If we change the definition, all the theories need to be changed.
Right.
So it's all about how you establish the definition in the beginning. So I guess there's many versions about it. I can't be like this one is the real definition.
Right. I got your point. So there are some points that we gather experientially, right? There are some that we get axiomatically. So what I'm referring to, these are axiomatic truths or necessary truths. For example, there being dependency and independency, that's a necessary truth. The definition of species or the definition of time, that's not a necessary truth. That's inductive, and you're absolutely right, that can change tomorrow. Yeah, so there is something which is a priori, which we can gain without our five senses, and there is a posteriori, which we get through the senses. I think maybe that's why we're talking past each other, because you guys are referring to the physical, I'm referring to the immaterial, the axiomatic. Yeah. So that's the difference. And dependency and independency is a priori. It's not going to change tomorrow. Something dependent will not become independent tomorrow, because by definition, something is dependent if it can cease to exist. Even if you can consider its non-existence. If you can consider its non-existence, then it must be dependent. By definition.
Make an example
Yeah. So
about something empirical.
So cause and effect. Cause and effect, we would argue, is a priori. Yeah? Actually, that's not a good example.
For us humans,
Huh.
not for every living.
What sort of example? Of a priori thing?
An example of something empirical, so not physical.
And with regards to the physical,
Said that your two discussions were different.
Yes.
Because he was talking about something physical and you were not.
yes. So for example, when you're talking about the definition of time, yeah, when you're talking about the definition of species, when you're talking about the Big Bang Theory, these are all physical, these are all based on our inductive faculties. It's based on induction, right? That we look at our observations. If there's enough observations to match our hypothesis, it will be passed as a theory. However, there being existence, yeah, that's something that's axiomatic. For us to do anything, we have to accept that there's existence. Even though it can't be put under a microscope, even though it's not physical, we have to accept there's existence.
Yes, but it's still something we made up.
But then, are you saying that that you might not exist, or that there is no existence? I just want to hear this answer. Remember your point, though. Do you believe that it's possible for there not to be existence?
I think it's something we thought. So I don't know.
Okay, now listen to what you said. It's something that we thought. That's presupposing a we,
What are you guys talking about?
and there's presupposing a thought. So there is existence.
I know.
Yes.
But still, it's. I think existence. I think all these not definitions, but like concepts are something that we created
Created or labeled?
I think created because I know I exist because I think I exist, but I think I exist.
You think you exist.
Yeah, because
Therefore you exist.
Not like that. Not like that.
Okay.
But I am human, so I think I exist. I don't think a wolf would think that's the same thing. So
Because you saying I think presupposes a mind, right?
yeah, but like a wolf will never think about something. I think a wolf would be purely objective.
Who won't be objective? A wolf.
An animal.
Animal. How do you know?
Example.
How do you
For
know?
example, I don't think an animal would think I exist.
Thomas Kuhn, he's written a paper peer-reviewed, right? He says, and he gives the examples of bats. We as human beings will never know how a bat views reality. We can superimpose our understanding on it. If we see an animal maybe writhing to what it seems to us writhing in pain, we will label it as pain. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's in pain.
I think science can know when an animal is in pain. Also,
But pain itself is not a physical thing, right? Pain is not a physical thing.
It is because it's in the nervous systems.
So if I was to open up a human being, I'd be able to see pain.
Yeah. Also,
I'd be able to see flashes of electricity, but that is not pain, right? Even if I'm elated, that will be electricity. Even if I'm angry, like, oh, then, you know what I mean? Sorry, I just went like this, but you're looking that way. So that's not pain though. That flash of electricity is not pain, right? It's an interpretation of the electricity, correct? So again, it's our understanding of that electricity that we are interpreting as pain.
but still it's physical. So,
But just because it's physical doesn't mean it's pain. I've met certain warriors. You go like that to them, and they're like, they feel nothing.
yeah, but like when you do that, the nerves about that slap signal in the brain, and the brain felt something.
The brain felt something, or the brain interpreted it.
Felt something.
Brain doesn't feel things.
It's like a reading a pattern.
Yeah, a pattern, reading a pattern and concluding. If I read a pattern doesn't mean I'm feeling that thing that from which the pattern is coming, right? Reading a pattern is different to feeling it. So because the brain is interpreting something, doesn't mean the brain is feeling it. The brain is interpreting it as pain. You might go to certain cultures in which they don't regard that as pain. Go to certain bros, they go like this, hey! They don't interpret that as pain. They interpret that as love. Yeah? You go to somebody else, like I saw one guy, he won a fight, and his sensei, punched him in the face. He interpreted that as respect and go, oh. Yeah, why? And he go, oh. He went like that. Why? Because it was a source of honor for him. He didn't go like, do you see?
But still, the signal of the punch went into the brain, and it felt pain. But then that punch was an happy punch, you must felt also happy. So you felt also the pain and also the happiness.
How do you know if it's happiness or if it's sadness?
Molecules.
Molecules don't have anything to do with electric signal? Electric signal.
A molecule.
The molecules.
Yep.
How?
Serotonin.
Oh, hormones.
There are molecules.
Okay, but not to be inappropriate, but there are certain practices that people do in which they get pain, but they feel elated. Yeah? You know what I'm saying, yeah? So they are going to release a different type of hormone. Does that mean that that thing that they are getting...
Feel pain.
But you said hormones. They are getting a happy hormone.
Yeah,
Like
but you
dopamine
still-
release.
But you still feel pain.
But
You can say that it wasn't painful, but you can say it also brings happiness.
okay, let's take one step back. So how do you interpret if something is painful or not? The electrical signal or the hormones? Because in this example I've said there's dopamine that's been released. Dopamine. Not cortisol. Yeah? Based on the body's physical chemistry, a scientist or a chemist will be able to conclude that that person felt happy, not pain. If you're saying no, we have to look at the electrical signals, then we have to look at how the brain has interpreted electrical signals. And we know very little about which part of the brain is an indication of what type of emotion. Sometimes we're able to say, oh, that part of the brain indicates happiness, but if the person becomes brain damaged, then it moves to a different part of the brain. So we have very little understanding on brain physiology and where emotions, feelings, and memories are localized. That's why I'm trying to pin down where you believe it's coming from.
Brother, please give me 1 minute, please.
Can we speak after this, inshallah?
The gentleman, he need the help. He was about to profit.
Brother, this brother is fitna. I spoke to him last time and he just shouted. Too much shouting.
He doesn't want to listen.
He doesn't want to listen. I asked him last time, very simple question. How many gods died on the cross? And he couldn't answer. No problem. So, how did we even get to this point? Yeah, okay, so if we then, so you were saying, in terms of experience, things that are learnt experientially and things that are learnt non-experientially, yeah? A priori or a posteriori, yeah? So I'm saying, and we talked about existence, and you talking about how you believe that you exist, your mind, etc., yeah? So I'm saying that if a person casts aspersions on whether there is existence, then everything falls apart. Then your physics degree falls apart. You even speaking to each other falls apart. If there is no existence, there's nothing. There's a question mark on everything. Then there is no morality. There's no, I would say, experiential certainty. Not epistemic certainty, experiential certainty. So what I'm saying is, according to the principle of sufficient reason, according to our understanding of design and things that are either created by chance, order, as opposed to chaos, all evidences point towards a creator as opposed to a non-creator. That makes the most sense. And then if you then further ask yourself, is it one creator or is it many creators? Then when you look at the definition of an independent, could there be many independent beings? No, there can't be, because an independent, everything relies on it and it relies on no one. So if there are two independent beings, that means one of the independent beings does not rely on the other independent beings. Therefore, by definition, not everything relies upon this. So it can't be independent. It becomes logically incoherent. So as Muslims, we believe that there is a God, there is a creator. The creator, like we were doing, can be rationalized philosophized, and even when you're looking at certain empirical things, you can reach the inference to the best explanation that there is a creator, logically, rationally, philosophically. Then it makes sense that that creator, being the all-wise and us being limited, has not just let us be because we believe him to be all-wise. So he has tried to communicate to us. And lo and behold, this is the translation of the scripture that he has sent us. Yeah, it's a translation, and you guys are welcome to have a read in your spare time. See what your creator has said to you. It's a translation though. And if something comes from the creator, we believe that there have to be certain criteria. If a book comes from God, surely we have to have it in the same form that it was when it was revealed. Otherwise, it's no longer there. And as Muslims, we argue and we debate and we discuss and we reason. When you look at the Bible, Old and New Testament, it has been changed. When you look at the Vedas, it has been changed. Even when you look at modern religions like Sikhism and their Guru Granth Sahib, their original manuscripts, there is inconsistencies and there is a lack of evidence for us to verify the original Guru Granth Sahib. The Quran, however, is the only holy book that we have chains of narration and manuscripts dating to the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. We read it in the original Arabic and we memorize it also. And Arabic is a living language. It's the 4th or 5th most spoken language in the world. Jesus spoke Aramaic. New Testament was in Greek. Christians do not speak Aramaic. It's UNESCO said it's fast becoming extinct. Hebrew, the language of the Old Testament, only Palestinians in Palestine speaks it. Yeah, I mean they claim that they're Israel, but Palestine. Yeah. So then, even when we're looking at, for example, the evidence within the Quran has a falsification test. Yeah, science has a falsification test as well. That typically speaking, if you present a theory, best practice is that theory attempts to be falsified. And then if it's not falsifiable, then we can put it forward. That's best practice. Yeah. So same with the Quran. The Quran has a challenge in there. That if you believe it was sent by anyone other than God, produce a verse like it if you are truthful. And you have non-Muslim scholars like Angelica Neuwirth, not even Muslims, non-Muslim scholars that say that this challenge was not met by the original, the Arabs at the time of the Prophet, because their level of Arabic was unparalleled. But there are other challenges. For example, if it was revealed by anyone other than God, in it you would find a lot of contradictions. In it you would find inconsistencies, even when it comes to the concept of God. Christians, as you go through the park, they will tell you, if you ask them honestly, they believe that Jesus is fully God and fully man, which is of course a contradiction. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. How can you be fully God and fully man? Yeah, Jesus was limited in knowledge, but God is unlimited in knowledge. So how?
In Christianity, I'm not Christian.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like that because I've gone to many Christian schools, and God is just God, and Jesus was his human form.
Can't say that. That's the heresy of modalism.
I studied like that in Italy.
Okay. No, go ahead.
No, that's it.
So Italians are Catholics, right? Generally speaking. So the Catholics accept the 7 ecumenical councils. And the 7 ecumenical councils are clear, unambiguous in their depiction of Jesus. In fact, it's in the Council of Ephesus that it says that Jesus is fully divine and fully God, undivided, unconfused, unchanged, and those are, you can check this yourself. Anyone who denies this, there are like 12 or 12 plus anathemas, i.e. heresies, that you become a heretic. So for you to be a Christian, you have to accept that there's Father, Son and Holy Spirit, all three are co-equal, co-eternal, but three individual beings. Jesus himself was fully God and fully man. He is independent, yet he is begotten, or rather he is eternally begotten by the Father. I'm choosing my words very carefully because I don't want to upset the Christians, yeah? So they believe he is fully begotten eternally begotten from the Father, and the Holy Spirit is eternally generated from the Father, yet they are both independent, which again is another contradiction. It doesn't make sense. But that in itself, because think about it, if Jesus was only man, then Jesus dying on the cross holds no significance for the Christians because they have to believe God died for their sins. Again, emphasized in the Council of Ephesus, which is something accepted by the Catholic Church. So based upon that, their belief in God doesn't make sense. Yeah, that if Jesus is God and the Father is God, according to the law of identity, the Father has to equal the Son. Yeah, I'll say that again. If Father is God, Jesus is God, therefore the Father equals the Son, which goes against the law of identity, which is a very important principle of logic. So what I'm saying is that comparatively speaking, because you mentioned that there are so many theories, and you mentioned as well, I just wanted to come full circle. I appreciate you guys being patient, so I'll wrap up. That when you look and you compare the logical consistencies, you will notice that evidentially Islam is more coherent. Practically, Islam is more coherent. Philosophically, Islam is more coherent. Logically, Islam is... I can go on. So like that, then you ask yourself, if something truly comes from God, should it be coherent or should it be incoherent? And that's why my argument would be, something that comes from God has to be coherent, because God himself says that had it come from anything other than God, in it you'd find loads of contradictions. But it says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say he is God the one, independent, pre and post-eternal, and there is nothing like it. Very simple definition of God. Ask a Christian this. What's your definition of God? So God is all kind, all merciful, and he's the all-powerful. Okay, was Jesus all-powerful? No, in his human form, in his human identity. Okay, so but was that human identity God? But wasn't both the human and the divine in one person? It becomes very technical. I don't want to bore you with the details, but that's in a nutshell. Do you have any questions about what I said about the Islamic aspect? I know we discussed about the other aspects. Anything about Islam that you guys want to get clarified? Sorry?
I know very little about Islam,
so you have the Quran now. You have the Quran now. Sorry, he's a heckler. Yeah. So when it comes to the Quran, you can read that. And I would say, and we as Muslims will welcome this as well at Speaker's Corner. If you see, when you're walking down the street, there'll be someone with a table that says Quran on there, and come ask me questions. Have questions. Yeah, because as Muslims, we don't mind, because something that comes from God, not everyone's going to understand it straight away. But as Muslims, it's our responsibility to inform people, to help people. And yes, we can be accepting and respectful of other people and their beliefs, but we can have our own belief, and you guys can have your own belief and believe, you know what, this is the most rational. Yeah, and this is the most logical. And then you guys can, then progress beyond that. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your time, guys, and hope you enjoy your time here. Any other questions? I'll be here. Come back to me, yeah? Take it easy. Thank you.
Yeah, you smell. Come on, go. Yeah, no, you smell. Yeah. Come on.
Which one?
Get lost, mate. Get lost. Thank you. Get lost, mate. Sorry, guys. We got some guys trying to troll in it.